Hello, Jamie from Inky and Scrappy, sharing with you today card 3 of 5 in my Totally Awesome Stamp Set series featuring Fawn products. I am doing a Slimline Swish-n-Pop card for today's series. Thank you for coming back to all of my subscribers. And if you are new here, please click that subscribe button so you'll be notified when new videos go up on the channel. I started by die cutting that Cattail border piece from my homemade piece of cardstock there. It was some Distress Oxide ink in Forest Moss, and there was some mixed Flickering Candlelight Mica spray in there. I'd actually used the overspray and just brushed it onto the card base surface because I spray into a plastic like dish tub that I got at the dollar store. And so it lets me use all of that inky goodness up for other things. So I'm just trying to figure out how high I need my pond, or how far up on my card I need my pond, and how tall that grass piece actually is, because I cut it from the top without actually measuring it, because I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do with this card when I cut out the cattail borders. I just knew that I needed cattail borders. So I will run that one through the die cut machine, and then for my cattail borders base here, I'm going to trim that down a little bit because my card base is going to measure 8.5 by 3.5. Yeah, 3.5. And then, so I don't want those cattails to be sitting off the top, if that makes sense. And so I'm just double checking my height here to make sure that I'm going to be far enough up, because I really don't need a lot of that cattail grass below showing. And then I'm going to do my Swish-n-Pop mechanism here. I did leave this fairly close to time. I might do a pop-up video this one because I think I explained it as I did it. So it's a lot easier for me to just load it and do the pop-up video that way for explaining purposes. I just want to make sure that my little image is going to, I'm going to do the leaping frog. So I wanted to make sure that he was going to leap far enough across, use most of the card, if that makes sense. I want him to swish over the whole thing, not just one little area of the card. So I'm just checking to make sure. And then I just used a piece of scrap acetate here. I didn't need it to be the full length, so I could get by with just using a partial cut. And then for the pull tab feature here, this is a super heavy cardstock. This is 110 to 120 pound, either Nina Classic Crest Solar White cardstock or Accent Opaque 120 pound cardstock. And so to reinforce that pull tab feature, because that's where most of that action is going to occur, and you want it to be firm so it can slide in and out fairly freely without buckling, I guess you could say. So I double that up. Using glue, to me, seems to be the best bet to hold it together tight. So I'm just going to take out some mini brads. These are just mini brads from Recollections. Any mini brads you have would work, even regular size brads, although regular size brads you might need to adjust your foam to compensate for that added height, or pound down the head of your brads would also help with that added height, I guess. But make sure they're loose enough to still wiggle. So once I knew that piece was going to work, I needed to go back on to finishing my card base. And I am just using the scrap paper from the other piece that I cut, because that other piece that I cut was a 4-inch tall piece of cardstock. It was a scrap from actually making a card base. So I have like I have a stack of them, and so that's what I'm going to use for my card base here. And I was just conserving paper. I didn't need the whole sheet, I just needed the top part. And then for the pond, I actually went in, and I don't know, I lost footage which is fine because this one tends to be extremely long. Anyways, because the cattails were painted on their background, or that green was, I decided I wanted the pond to have that similar brush stroke look. So I took a piece of chipped sapphire distress, not oxide, just regular distress ink, and put a drop of that on my mat here, and a drop of Brutus Monroe's aqua pigments in Blue Frost. So it's got that mica shine to it. And then I just painted that on, added a little bit of water to it so it was fluid. I might have even missed my cardstock a little bit to make it flow a little easier. And I just painted that on in a sweeping motion. As you will see that it kind of has that sweeping across the page motion when I finished it up. And that's how I did that piece. I just let it sit and dry until it was done. And then for my base here, because I don't want my Swish-n-Pop mechanism to get caught on those cattail borders, because that was one of my biggest, probably my biggest fears, is that it was going to get hung up on those cattails. I had raised the panel up using some super fine foam tape. I used Simon Says Stamp foam tape, but if you have a different one you can use. You could even do a taller one. I just chose that one as I just needed enough of a lift to let that brad that's behind there free movement. But then I went and I glued down all of the cattail pieces flush to the back of the card. So there is like a little dip there, but it's not super noticeable, and it really doesn't matter in the whole scheme of things if that sort of thing bugs you, but it doesn't bug me. I just didn't want it to get caught on those cattails when I was working with that mechanism. This is technically my first Swish-n-Pop flat card. I have done it twice in the platform pop-up, so I haven't actually ever done it on a flat card. So it was similar in essence, probably a lot easier than adding it to the platform pop-up. And so I'm just measuring it out here, making sure that that tab is going to be, or the pull tab is going to stay behind the pond. So I needed to make sure my pond was tall enough for that, plus have a little bit of room there to make that notch with that notch die that comes with the Swish-n-Pop interactive die set. And then I know I'm going to need foam tape behind it. And I want to place my frog so I kind of know where he's going to be at on my panel, so I can kind of figure out where my foam tape is going to go. I'm just going to add him right on here to the end of my pull tab feature with some double-sided tape or score tape. I think mine was scrapbook.com tape. And then I just need to make sure where he's going to land. So I will adjust him here momentarily. I will just put a new piece of tape further down, since that one was a little, well, okay, I used that piece of tape to make sure my placement is right first, and then I will go and find some more permanent solution later on. I hope I did. You know, I guess I'll find out as we watch the video if I remembered to do that or not. So I'm just making sure that he's going to land somewhere on that log. That was the whole idea of this one, that he was going to be jumping out of the water onto the log. Oh, see, I did. I remembered to put that double-sided tape on him. And I just ran it across his body, knowing that that's the way he was going to sit on that piece there. And you can do this multiple ways. This is just how I did it for this card. The other cards, I did it totally different. And because I can bend over that thing, I could line it up better. And yes, you get to see the back of my lovely head, which is farm hair, don't care, because when you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you really don't care what the back of your head looks like. I'm just saying, it doesn't really matter to the cows. And so I'm going to add some foam here because I don't want him to go below where I'm going to be. And then being that that's the lowest point, I can have foam there. So I don't know, it's your stopper, right? And I think I do end up adding another piece of foam there to make sure that he stays up and off a little bit higher up. And then just adjusting as I go here to make sure that he's going to land where I want him to land. He was getting caught, or the acetate was actually getting caught on the edge of my card. So I just trimmed that off so it wasn't catching anymore. It made my life a little bit easier. And then we're going to pull out that other die from the Swish-n-Pop set that will add in that little notch for your pull tab. And I just like triple check to make sure that this is lined up in the proper spot. It's just kind of one of those you cut it once sort of things. I couldn't recut that piece of pond again, so it was a one and done type of thing. Measure 3 times, cut once, right? I mean, I do that and I still end up cutting wrong a lot of times, but it's all good. So I will pop that piece out and then also save that piece, because if you want to add it back in later, you're going to need that piece to match if you ink blended on your panel like I did. And of course it's not going to go right there because I'm going to have to trim that piece up yet. And so I just want to make sure that he is going to be fine. And then I can add in my foam tape here. I am using some scrapbook.com, I think they're an 1/8 inch foam strips. I want to say they're 9 inches long, but they come in super handy for anything that requires that skinny foam tape. And yes, my non-stick scissors, everything sticks to because they're old. I got a new pair, but you know how you can never find anything while you're making stuff? My other pair gets lost like as soon as I make them. I just wiggled down that top piece a little bit and drew a pencil line there, so I knew how far I could go up with my foam adhesive and not have to constantly put that piece back down to make sure I am within my range there. So I got those foam squares off of Amazon, and that whole outside piece is fully connected, and so you know that it looks like it's going to make a perfect shaker box. I don't know if it will or not, but I don't think I've emptied one full sheet yet to try it out and see if I have a frame that will fit that yet. But if it works, I'll let you know. And then I'm just going to add some more foam adhesive here. Try to make sure that I have as much of it popped up as I possibly can. And this is where I probably should have taken that sheet and maybe like bent it out a little bit where there's no foam adhesive, because it was kind of a pest for a little bit there. I did end up having to pull it up a little bit and kind of bend it back out so my frog wouldn't get caught on it when he went back in his little pond. And I guess I could have put him the other way too, making him jump off of the log. I didn't even think about that until this voiceover, so that would have probably been a pretty cool option too, being that he needs to be all the way down for you to be able to send the card. I suppose it would have been cool to make him jump into the pond. You know, he is only on there with a piece of double-sided adhesive. I could probably switch him to go the other way yet. It might happen. Anyways, now I am just going to work on building the scene here. Putting that log where I need it to be so he can land on it or get almost to it. and that looks good. And then just working the mechanism a bunch to make sure that it's going to move freely when I'm done with it. This is a big part of interactive cards, is making sure that mechanism is well worn in, or that your papers are well trained. I guess I don't know how else to say it, but it makes that paper memory or that movement a lot smoother if you work it a bunch. It's kind of like the flippy flappy. If you work it a bunch, it works well. If you do not work it a bunch, the first probably 24 times you work on the flippy flappy, pulling it in and out, it gets easier as you go. Does that make sense? So if you struggle with some of those interactive elements, my advice is to play with them a lot while you're making them. A, it's fun to see the movement, and B, it actually helps make that card work a whole lot better for the recipient, because they're not going to understand all the ins and outs that you understand because you put it together. Does that make sense? I don't know. So I'm just going to finish decorating up the card here. And again, everything was colored with that color map. I don't think I actually showed it in the beginning of this one, and this one is fairly long. So if you're interested in the coloring on this one, the color map will be on my website, www.inkyandscrappy.com. There should be a link in the description box below. I will also try to link all of the products that I used from scrapbook.com. And then I pulled in the little frogs from the Very Rainy Day set for this one because the baby frogs are adorable. And, you know, it had to happen, right? And then I did not decide where my sentiment was going to go on this one until I was all done with the actual scene. I did strategically place that middle lily pad up further because I figured that was where the sentiment was going to end up going. And I did put in some black jelly glaze pen for the eyeballs on my little frog. And let's just say I got a little overzealous, and so I had to let it dry and then pick it off, and I went over it with some white glaze pen or a white gel pen, and then added them back on for the final card. I do not show that on the video. It's already longer than my normal ones, so I wanted to make sure that we kept it within, normal time frames. So I cut out the letters for Hoppy from Oliver's Stitched ABCs because I wanted to add that bold sentiment. I thought about not and just making it the single one, but I really liked the option to do. It's a slimline card, so it has plenty of room there. And I just figured that have a Hoppy birthday in all stamped was so small for that big of a card. I wanted to add in that Hoppy in the cutout letters. And to make my Hoppy stand out or blend in a little bit better, I'm actually taking my number 6 marker for my Ohuhus and tip-to-tipping it with my colorless blender and actually coloring with the colorless blender. And as I work up the letter, I'm making sure that my color is mostly out of the tip before I get to the top. And then before I cap it, I make sure that the tip is fully clean. When I only used Copics, I struggled with doing tip to tip because I was always worried about contaminating my marker. If that's something that scares you too, get a cheap set of Ohuhus and try it, or even whatever your local scrapbook store has for their cheapest version of an alcohol marker. It has probably helped my coloring quite a bit to not be afraid to do tip to tip. And because Ohuhus are like 50 cents a piece if you buy the 200 set, I wasn't overly concerned about ruining them. And so I'm pretty good about doing the tip to tip now, even with my Copics. And there is the completed card, the frog jumping from the pond onto the log. And thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.